What is up, everybody? Welcome into the Guilty as Charged podcast. We upgrade our little software. We're recording on StreamYard, so I hope you enjoyed that little 30-second countdown. My name is Steven. I'm your host. Joining me, as always, are Tyler and Alex with their fancy names on their fancy screens. Alex, it's been a big weekend for you and your 76ers, man. How you doing today?
I'm doing pretty good. More important than that, was actually able to play basketball for the first time in a year. I got a Y membership, so that was very fun. I also cannot shoot for shit because it's been like a fucking year. But yeah, very fun. It says we're live, but does that mean we're live on YouTube? I don't know. I'm not gonna ask. That's a technical question. But yeah, no, excited to be here.
I hope not, man, because I just did the record only thing. So we'll see, I guess. Tyler, you got some big news as well this weekend. You got vaccinated. How you doing, man?
Yeah, my version of a Y membership is, why are you even here on the court? Because you're Chinese. I did get vaccinated. I'm a little under the weather. So when you guys go back and watch this episode to see where we ranked everybody, just blame it on the vaccination if I got something wrong, okay?
There we go. That's a good thing to say. That's a good preface. So we are going to go over our top 50. It's going to be a really fun episode for you guys today. Cannot wait for this. You know, we're going to have some discussions about some players that just missed the cut. Kind of our path to making these decisions on these players, how we ended up making them, who went where, kind of thing. And we also have a great interview with Ben Fennell, who was kind enough to join me, talking about some cornerbacks, some safeties, particularly how the league will view Caleb Farley, which I think is kind of a very fascinating storyline for the upcoming draft. So if you're watching this on YouTube, my interview with Ben Fennell is going to be on a separate video. So make sure and go watch that after you watch this episode. If you are listening to this on the audio, that interview is going to happen right now. All right, so guys, let's dive into this top 50. I think we should start with the players who just missed the cut. So each of us I have 4 quarterbacks in my top 50. I think Tyler has 4 and Alex actually has 5. So each of us chose the next players on our list that would have made the top 50 if we did not include quarterbacks, right? Because, you know, some of the decisions that went into this is very specific to the Chargers. So I think it's important to mention these players that would have made the top 50 if we did not include quarterbacks. So Tyler, why don't you kick us off with your 4 players that you have on your list that would have made your top 50 if you took off the quarterbacks?
Yeah, one I hated to leave off. I realized I miscounted, so I had 51 originally. So I had to take one of these guys off, and I took off Trey Smith. I really, really like Trey Smith a lot as a football player. Unfortunately, I can't ignore the injuries, or not the injuries, but the medical concerns. And because my board is a little bit of a combination of grades, position rankings, value, and those medical concerns, I had to put him, off. I would definitely put him on this list. Like, if we were just doing grades, he'd probably be my top 40. But just because I have to consider some of those other issues, I had to knock him off. Another guy I knocked off is Dez Fitzpatrick, the wide receiver from Louisville, who I love. Like, Steven and I for sure have loved him like since the moment we watched him.
Yeah,
crushed at Senior Bowl practice, and then just the more you watch him, the more you realize that this guy. And there's very few like outside guys in this draft. And he's definitely one that you can get probably on maybe day 2 at this point, but possibly day 3. Another one is Jabril Cox, the linebacker / safety hybrid from LSU. I was kind of down on him, but still, like, he would be in my top, 50 if I didn't have quarterback. So it's not like I hate him. I was just down on him just a little bit. And then finally, Davion Nixon, the interior defensive lineman from Iowa, a guy who I like as a pass rusher, but not so much as a run defender. He's my interior defensive lineman 3. So I do have 2 in my top 50, and we'll get into those in a bit.
Yeah, I think those are good conversations to have, right? Because Dez Fitzpatrick, I think, is outstanding. Obviously, Jabril Cox and Trey Smith. The Trey Smith thing is interesting. If you listen to Voch Lombardi, he has Trey Smith listed as a tackle, which I think is a super interesting conversation. Trey Smith did play as an offensive tackle, I think, as a freshman, and then they moved him to guard. The interior defensive line class, it's no secret I'm not the biggest fan of them. I don't have a single one, even if you stretch this out to 54. But that's just kind of my preference. Alex, we'll get to you next, man. You have 5 quarterbacks in the top 50. So let's get to that quarterback conversation first with you, because Tyler and I don't have 5. So you have 5. why did you feel like you had to put Mac Jones in your top 50? And then after that, who are your 5 that just missed the cut?
I mean, I do feel like Mac Jones is like I don't know, second or third round talent. Like he is talented, not top 3 talented, in the draft. He did have a really good season this year, and I think if you're talking about like a Kirk Cousins type of player, like those are kind of the guys that go in like the second or third round. So I wasn't overly impressed by him, and he's definitely, after Zach Wilson on my list, it's a pretty steep drop off. Mac Jones is at 48. I think Zach Wilson is at 22-ish. But I did have to include him because he is probably very likely to be drafted in the top 10. And I think he was, talented enough to warrant, being on the list. Granted, if you do make it more of a Chargers list, then maybe Mac Jones wouldn't be on here. And that was kind of a difference in philosophy. I just did straight up, who are my best 50 players. My top 5 guys that would have made the list, but were just on the outside, were Joe Tryon, edge from Washington. Really wanted to fit him in the top 50, but there were just quite a few edges I just couldn't put him over when I was making my rankings, so I put him at 51. De'Ami Brown is at 52. I know that's kind of Steven's crush, and I like him a lot, but it's just the wide receivers are super competitive this year, and like the fact that I have 9 and he's just the 10th, like that's kind of indicative of the wide receiver talent in this draft, in my opinion. Brady Christensen, really good. I think that's the right range for him, just in terms of like where the draft is. I haven't counted exactly how many offensive tackles I had. I think I had 6, so that would make Brady Christensen my OT 7. I think he was really impressive. Obviously, is a physical specimen, and I think he's one of the few second round tackles, or to the end of the second round tackles, I should say, that I think can play kind of on day one, which kind of led to me putting him as high as he is. And then I have edge Joseph Asai from Texas. I think he would fit really well in a Brandon Staley scheme if he were to be drafted. I don't think they're going to be going edge in the second round, but do think he's really impressive. And I have Javon Holland from Oregon at 55.
That's a good list, man. I think, obviously the one that I'm going to disagree with is obviously De'Ami Brown as well as Joseph Osai. But Brady Christensen is an interesting study, right? Because he tested in like the 97th percentile. And like, I thought he was a good athlete on tape, but then you see him test like that. And it was, you had to go back and revisit. So I think he's an interesting one to keep an eye on for the Chargers. Like, we've kind of been talking about how they'll value length, and Brady Christensen is probably like the cutoff of like, okay, I'm okay with this guy starting for the Chargers from day one at left tackle. But I mean, he did measure under the 33-inch arm threshold, so that's going to be an interesting one to keep an eye on there.
Yeah, for sure. And just the thing I think when making this list is, I didn't make it as much of a like, oh, this guy fits the Chargers really well type list. I just kind of did straight up who are my top 50. So I think that and the fact that I didn't like grade based on numbers, that will probably be like the biggest differences in me and Steven and Tyler's list probably.
Yeah. So
what's up with you not liking numbers, man? You're like my whole draft value chart and the draft grades. Like, who cares about math? Fine.
Hey, who doesn't care about math is Michael Lombardi.
Or Christmas today, apparently.
Oh, gosh, Christmas is a dummy. So let's get into these lists. You guys wanted to go 1 through 10 first, or should we start at the bottom 50 first?
I think we should start from the bottom.
All right, there we go. So we'll start with the bottom. Oh, I didn't give my 4 players, so jumping on a little bit. So my 4 players that just missed the cut are Terrace Marshall, the wide receiver from LSU. Big fan of him. I think he's kind of going to be an interesting one to watch as well, because this draft is so heavy with slot receivers. But Terrace Marshall, he's got prototypical size. I think he's 6'3", and so his kind of size and length is really going to put him separate him from the rest in terms of physical profile. And then Brevin Jordan, me and Tyler have been, pretty steady with how we feel about him. It's just unfortunate because, he did test very, very poorly. And so, you have to go back in and watch that. And I do great athleticism for that kind of position. So I moved him down a little bit. And then Tylan Wallace, the wide receiver from Oklahoma State, I think is one of the most underrated players in this class. I think people watch him at Oklahoma State and just see him catch a bunch of jump balls and think that's all he can do. And I really kind of disagree with that assessment. And so Tylan Wallace is somebody that I think is going to be a very good pro. And then the last player is Cameron Bynum, the safety / corner from Cal. I know a lot of people are going to be like, wow, that is super rich, but I just love the way that he plays, man. He's so physical. He's got great ball skills, and he moves all around all over the field at Cal. I do think that he's probably a safety or a big nickel in the NFL, and that's fine. I think he's going to have a good amount of value, but I don't really care about like the perception of him. I just really, really enjoyed watching him play. Love the way that he approaches the game and just the physicality and tackling presence that he brings. So I couldn't leave Cameron Bynum off. I know I'm going to be much higher on him than most, but I'm just a big fan of his.
It's all good. I mean, he was what 200 something on TDN, and hey, we did a mock draft, and I mocked a guy who was in 400 something. So, I get it. I think that your decision to put him as a safety, I think helps his grade here, and this makes more sense to me. When he was originally a corner, I didn't like him as much, but you bumped him to safety, and I kind of get that. So, I have him a little bit underneath you. I don't have him in my top 55, but I get it. Like, I'm not going to bash you just because he's your 50 whatever player.
Yeah, so let's get to these top 50. We're going to go from 50 up to 41. We're just going to rattle off the names, and then we'll see, what kind of stands out from each of our choices. I'll go first here since we started with the other way. So I'll go first here. Number 50 on my list is Ifeatu Melifonwu, the cornerback from Syracuse. Again, another player that I feel like is being very much slept on. Number 49 is Carlos Boogie Basham, the edge from Wake Forest, someone that I've been very high on from day one. Next is Javon Holland, the safety from Oregon. And then Des Fitzpatrick, the wide receiver from Louisville. Eric Stokes, the cornerback from Georgia. Gregory Rousseau, the edge rusher from Miami. Alex Leatherwood, a new addition to my list, the offensive tackle from Alabama. Michael Carter, the running back from North Carolina. And Wyatt Davis, the interior offensive lineman from Ohio State. And then rounding it out is Kadarius Toney, the wide receiver from Florida. So, guys, what are your thoughts on the bottom of my list here?
I think it's pretty good, 50 to 40 range, just because I think guys are going to go in there. I wouldn't be shocked if a team took Kadarius Toney pretty early, but, I have him around the same kind of range on my list. I think I actually have him, you have him at 41, I have him at 42, so pretty similar valuations. Rousseau is a little bit low to me, but I know both you and Tyler are lower on him than I am. And then, I definitely think Ifeatu, while he's not on my list, has definitely been rocketing up the draft boards in stock. And I wouldn't be surprised to see him taken in the second round.
Yeah, I have not watched Melifonwu, so I can't say anything about him. But Rousseau is such an interesting one because I heard you talk about him. We've talked about him at like 13, but then you see him here at your 40. Fifth overall player. Such an interesting conversation, the one you have with Brentley, what we've been having all off season. Where to place this guy, I don't know. Like, yeah, I'm lower on him. Like, even though you have him 45th, I think I have him at 39. And so I think we could both see him going earlier than that, though, especially where we have him ranked. And it is somewhat realistic. You do have to look at what he did. But I think he'll go higher because of what he can be. Talk to me about Javon Holland, though, because I saw him. I think it was PFF had him as an outside corner. I have not watched him, but I know a couple of that's kind of a discussion. So is that viable? Is that a thing that's happening, or?
I mean, I think he could do it in a pinch. Like I certainly would not place him primarily as an outside corner. To me, he's kind of a nickel / free safety hybrid. I think that's kind of where he played best. Oregon really played him at nickel cornerback, and that was pretty much about it. It was a little odd because Javon Holland is a little bit bigger and longer than Thomas Graham, and Thomas Graham was the outside corner, and Javon Holland was, a nickel / safety hybrid. So I just look at like his athletic profile and the way that he sees the field. I would prefer to have him back as a free safety in like a too high shell kind of look. I wouldn't put him in a single high free safety look, and I definitely wouldn't put him in the box. So I think his fit is a little weird in terms of like the NFL because, he's not going to be someone that a cover 3 team is like, yeah, we want to put Javon Holland at free safety, or we want to put him at exclusively at nickel. And so I think the fit is a little clunky for a lot of the league, but specifically for the Chargers, I think you could put him in the slot. You can put him at free safety in a too high shell or strong safety. I don't think he can play outside. I think he can do it occasionally, but I wouldn't put him on an island out there at all.
That might have been my mistake. It was a list of corners. It might have just been a list of corners, not necessarily outside or inside. But I know JC Horn wasn't happy about it.
He lets people know when he's not happy on Twitter.
He does, man. He does. I loved it. I love that he called out PFF twice. All right, Alex, let's get to your list 50 through 41.
50, I have wide receiver Anthony Schwartz from Auburn, linebacker Zaven Collins from Tulsa at 49, Alabama quarterback Mac Jones at 48, Stanford's Paulson Adebo at 47, Carlos Basham, edge at 46, Richie Grant, safety at 45, Trey Smith from Tennessee, interior offensive line at 44, Brevin Jordan from Miami at 43, Kadarius Toney at 42, like I just mentioned, at wide receiver, and Peyton Turner from Houston, edge at 41.
So Tyler and
like
Alex both of you guys have Peyton Turner in your top 50. I don't. So let's talk about Peyton Turner. Alex, what do you see specifically in Turner that warrants a where do you have him at 41?
Yeah, I do have him at 41. I don't know. Someone mentioned it. I think it was Brett Coleman on Twitter was like, well, I added up all my grades. It turned out that Peyton Turner was there. He has a lot of like kind of quick burst, quickness. Just really is good at standing up as a pass rusher. I just think I'd like to take him in the third round if he's there, but you do see his stock kind of moving up. I would not be mad at all if they took him in the second round. And I just think he's a really hard worker. And I think that you can kind of put him in any edge scheme and he'll just sort of work. And that's why, Vach Lombardi had him at 32. I have him at 41. Like, it's just really hard not to like him. And that was just the thing I noticed when watching him. I understand why people would be lower and why some people will be higher. But for me, I just think you look at his physical traits, obviously 6'6", 270, and you just look at his quickness. And that's what this team needs off the edge, both in terms of size and length. So I think he would be a perfect second round pick. And I think, if they take him there, I would really like it.
Yeah, I like the surprise of Brett Coleman saying that, oh my God, he's my edge 3. But the way we have him graded is he's not my edge 3, but the way we have him graded and the things that we grade him on, some of them are scheme versatility, short area quickness, and motor and effort. And he definitely has those things in spades. Right. So I can understand why, you're just doing the grades, you're not looking at what everybody else is, and suddenly you add those things up and his grade's really high because he does check a lot of boxes. He's a great interview. The interview that you guys did with him was great. High effort kind of guy, huge guy, tons of upside. So yeah, him being in my top, he's my 45th guy. Like I don't love him. He's my 8th ranked edge guy, but there are edge guys in this class. But there's a lot to like about him on and off the field.
I do have him as my 5th ranked edge, just looking here and seeing the edges that I have ahead. So yeah, he is my edge 5.
I think that's a very interesting conversation. The Chargers probably have to take him at 47 if they do want to take him.
Yeah.
All right, Tyler, let's get to your list 50 through 41.
Can I bug Alex for one more thing? Yeah, Alex, do you not have Eric Stokes intentionally on your list?
No, I do not.
Oh, wow. Okay. I just remember like a list that came out that it was like he was your top 5 or top 6. So Adebo definitely jumped in.
Yeah, I don't know. I kind of changed my mind on both of the Georgia guys. I got a lot of flack for not liking Eric Stokes and what's the other Georgia corner's name? I can't remember his name. Tyson Campbell. I don't know. I see some potential there, and like if I kept going from 55 to like 65, I think they probably would have made it in that range. But for me, I don't know. I really liked Adebo when rewatching him, and that sort of leaped him into this territory here. And then I also, of course, have the 5 cornerbacks counting Asante Samuel. So it was just also really hard to fit the Georgia corners in here too.
Yeah, Totally get it. I was just curious, just because I know you were slightly higher on him before, but now he's out. So
Yeah.
anyway, my top 50, I have Alex Leatherwood, then I have Wyatt Davis, then Levi Onwuzurike, then Jamin Davis, Brevin Jordan, Peyton Turner, Joe Tryon, Liam Eichenberg, Christian Barmore, Dylan Radunes, and that's it. We're stopping at 41, right?
Yep. Okay, so this is an interesting conversation. How close are Joe Tryon and Peyton Turner for you? Because they're right next to each other. What was kind of the difference there?
I flipped a coin, honestly, and it was just kind of like whatever it was. That's a good question. Actually, looking at this, I probably would flip Turner and Tryon. Yeah, I think I would flip them. I have them just right next to each other. I don't know. I guess Peyton Turner's level of competition is a little bit lower. He didn't play as many games. Like, it's not like now I'm questioning myself. So it wasn't that much of a difference. Like, honestly, it could have been either one. If I told you that it was like alphabetical, then that would have been like my response, I suppose.
I think honestly, like, if I remember right, like the first time that we had our list up, you had like tiebreaker equals last name or something like that. So I think that actually might be it. Alex, anything stand out about Tyler's list right here to start off?
Not much. I mean, I have Liam Eichenberg a little bit higher, but I think every one of these guys except was it Rike? I think he was the guy that didn't make my top 50, but I think every one of these guys is in my top 50, so I totally understand why they're there.
Yeah, the defensive tackle class, I'm sure I'm going to get some hate for this, but Levi Onwuzurike is my top graded interior defensive lineman. I just think, people have asked me about Christian Barmore. Here's the thing with Barmore, in my opinion. If you watch his playoff run, he's probably like the best defensive player on the field, including over Pat. But if you watch his game against Missouri, the dude's nowhere. Like, he's not making any kind of plays. And that's kind of, the consistency factor for me is why I put Onwuzurike up there. And I do think that Onwuzurike is a little bit more polished as a pass rusher, and he's got an incredibly quick get off. So Onwuzurike, I think, would probably be like at 56 or 57 for me. But I just, the defensive tackle class in general is not my favorite this year. So we'll move on now. We'll get to my list, 40 through 31. At 40, I have Paulson Adebo, the cornerback from Stanford. I'm all aboard that train. Next, I have Joseph Osai, the edge rusher from Texas. Zach Wilson, the quarterback from BYU. Travis Etienne, the running back from Clemson. Jabril Cox at 36, the linebacker from LSU. Rashad Bateman, the receiver from Minnesota at 35. Greg Newsome, the cornerback from Northwestern. Dylan Radunes, the offensive tackle from North Dakota State at 33. De'Ami Brown, my guy, the receiver from North Carolina. And then Asante Samuel Jr., the cornerback from Florida State, rounds out at number 31.
Steven, I'm going to have to ask you a question. Now, Zach Wilson being at 40, is that just about your BYU hate boner, or is it something more substantive?
Listen, man, I fully understand why he's going number 2. He's a very talented quarterback, but we do grade ability under pressure for quarterbacks.
Right.
And that's something that's very important to me personally. That's kind of why I was not super high on Justin Herbert last year. And so I just, I didn't love the way that Zach Wilson, his pocket presence in general is not my favorite. And we didn't really get to see him truly improve upon that trait this year because he was never under pressure. Like, you watch any kind of BYU game, and Houston is really the only team that ever got anything close to him, and Coastal Carolina as well. So that really is my biggest issue with Zach Wilson. But, I totally understand why he's going in the top 2.
I like the way your board, like, it shows just the depth of the class in general, not necessarily a quarterback, but, Trey Lance is at 21 for you. And the difference between him and Wilson is only 0.21 on the grade. Yeah, I know, Alex, numbers. But, it's just how deep this class is. You have a lot more guys in like that, a certain range. I won't give away your grades, but you have some of those guys in a certain range. So it's interesting to see that even though Wilson is way down there for you, the difference in grades isn't all that different. And that's partially why I have like Onwuzurike in my top 50, because you actually have him graded higher than I do. It just happens that you like the middle of this class, or like between first and second round or so, a little bit more than I do, I think.
All right, let's get to Alex. Let's get to your list next, man.
Yeah, so 40 through 31, Khalil Herbert out of Virginia Tech clocks in at 40, Christian Barmore out of Alabama at 39, Jabril Cox out of LSU, linebacker 38, 37, Jamin Davis, 36, Terrace Marshall, wide receiver from LSU, Asante Samuel, cornerback at 35, Tevin Jenkins, 34, offensive tackle, Liam Eichenberg, 33, offensive tackle, and 32, Travis Etienne, and 31, Rondale Moore. So yeah, that is my 31 to 40 range.
I wonder which one we're going to ask about.
I don't know which one you're
going to
running
back.
Oh, it might be the running back.
Well, I mean, listen, like the Rondale Moore thing is a little rich for my personal taste, but I totally understand that the kind of athletic profile that he has. So, at 31, why not put Rondale Moore as a wide receiver? Like, what's the difference between him, and Terrace Marshall and Kadarius Toney for you?
With Kadarius Toney, I think in comparison to Terrace Marshall, because I have him higher up there, I would just say, even though he doesn't have that prototypical size, I just feel like some team, based on how he's athletically tested, can bring him to a deeper wide receiver route running tree. So I can't write off how well he tested to some extent because, and obviously he was really great at Purdue. I totally understand why you don't see him as a complete receiver, and but for me, we've seen, I guess, just so many guys come into the league that have had the athleticism and then just develop into the position. Obviously the exception to that is a guy like John Ross, for example. Which may be sort of the athletic comp in terms of just like, wow, this guy is a freak athlete, so let's draft him. But I don't think Rondale Moore is going to go quite that high because he has a bunch of receivers in front of him. And I just think he's worth taking more of a chance on just because of his strength and just his ability to, even if it's a limited route tree, I think his speed also kind of kills. Versus John Ross, I don't know. That dude can kind of only run in a straight line, which, was sort of his downfall in the NFL. So that's why I have him at 31. I kind of wrote on the side here that people comparing him to Tyreek Hill makes me cringe a little bit, just because that's every short wide receiver who's fast now. But I do think he does have the athletic traits that, I'm willing to bet on a little bit more. And there are more of these guys up the list where I just see the raw athleticism and I'm like, okay. And there are other guys too where I do see the raw athleticism and I don't buy it. But with Rondale Moore and just his tape and thinking about what coaches could do with him at the next level, that's kind of why he ended up where he was for me.
I totally get that. And the Rondale Moore experience for me has been interesting because I went on Twitter and I was like, yeah, wow. if he were really healthy, I think he'd be one of like the best receivers in this class. And then Steven's like, oh, Steven wasn't super thrilled with my decision. But then, like Steven, I think like watched a little more like the Ohio State game. I got a little higher on him. Yeah. But then I listened to what Steven was saying, and now I'm just a little bit lower on him as a receiver. And then you factor in the injuries to it, and he is up my list. But I completely understand why you would have him in here because the potential, I think, is there for sure. The Tyreek Hill comp is I do like the Steve Smith comp. Not that I like it like he's going to be Steve Smith, but it's just interesting the way he runs. And so I get it. But I do want to ask about Khalil Herbert, man. Like, are you putting a Herbert in your top 50 just to make up for not liking Justin Herbert last season?
I mean, well, you got to learn from your previous drafts. And I think that's one of the lessons you learn. But I think in terms of running backs, I had Travis Etienne, Javonte Williams, Najee Harris. So that would make Khalil Herbert my running back 4 on this list. And I know that's going to be high for people because some people see him as like running back 10. But I don't know. He's one of those guys like Anthony Schwartz, who was on the list earlier at 50. And I think he sort of proved it more in terms of his stats, in terms of his play style. Like, I just see kind of an NFL running back in there, and it's going to be interesting to see where he actually lands. I think he's going to be more of a 5th, 6th round, day 3 pick. But just in terms of the talent, how he blocks, how he contributes on plays, and sort of his, will, I did kind of have to factor that into him being in my top 50. Obviously, I also don't think it's a great running back class, to be perfectly honest. Like, after Travis Etienne and Javonte Williams, I was just sort of like, all of these guys are kind of either the same or they don't stand out. So if I watch tape and a guy does stand out, I was more willing to give him credit because of how sort of watered down I feel like this running back group is.
I definitely agree with that conversation because, Khalil Herbert is my running back 5 as well. But the drop off from Michael Carter to Khalil Herbert is a little steep, though. So I do think that Michael Carter does belong in that conversation. But I think, Najee Harris and Javonte Williams, for me personally, have really separated themselves. And then Travis Etienne and Michael Carter have been kind of, jockeying for position there. All right, Tyler, let's get to your list, 40 to 31.
Yeah, the theme of this section seems to be guys that are good, but there's something like not quite all the way there. So 40, I have Joseph Osai from Texas, then Gregory Rousseau from Miami, De'Ami Brown from North Carolina, Carlos Basham from Wake Forest, Zaven Collins from Tulsa, Travis Etienne from Clemson, Eric Stokes from Georgia, Kadarius Toney from Florida, Asante Samuel Jr. from Florida State, and Samuel Cosme from Texas.
So I guess on this list where you put Cosme there, did he improve for you, I guess, as time went on? Because I feel like I remember you being a little bit lower on him earlier, and then now you were kind of higher on him because Steven was higher on him too. But yeah, so did that sort of improve for you over time?
I actually not really. I think what it really was is I believe on this list I put Elijah Vera Tucker as interior offensive lineman. And so it kind of like bumps into like, I think I always had him in like the OT 5 through 7 kind of range. But either way, like I do feel specifically with Cosme, there's so much to love about him that I definitely want him in that top 5, but I just can't put him in any higher just because there are there's issues on tape. And I get the idea of traits and gambling on those traits and having a guy like Garrett Bowles eventually, becomes a great tackle in the league. But for right now, based on what he did, I just can't put him, higher yet. But so I think I've always been about right here with him.
I think that's a fair assessment, honestly. I know that I'm, one of the few that is very much higher on Samuel Cosme, and you'll see just how higher I have him in a second. But the one that I think is interesting because, you've been, very high on Asante Samuel Jr., pretty much this entire time. So having him, down there at 32, how close was he to jumping into your top 25 or top 20, so to speak?
Oh, he would have, if we took out some quarterbacks, I think he would jump into my top. Here he's on 20, where is he, 32? So he wouldn't have dropped into top 25, but like, I like him more than my ranking, I suppose. I think he's great at everything he does, but I do have to consider the athletic limitations, like of this list, of this like section of 10 guys where I like them, but his limitation is going to be his height and, the general lack of, physical skills, which I don't like to say because I love him so much. But I just can't have him higher than some of the guys who have a little bit more of a complete package. You know what I mean? Like I really like him, but he's just not quite in my top 25. But if I took out the quarterbacks, he'd be my top 30. So I think that's about right. The Chargers pick at 47. I think he'll go before 47. So I think that's about right for me.
Yeah, I agree with that one as well. So we'll get to him in a second I had him at 31. So that works out for me as well. All right, let's move on to the next one. I'm sure this is going to be very fun for Alex, particularly to hear this section. At number 30, I have Liam Eichenberg, the offensive tackle from Notre Dame. There's Javonte Williams, the running back from North Carolina. Zaven Collins, the linebacker from Tulsa. Trey Smith, the interior offensive lineman from Tennessee. Patrick Surtain, the cornerback from Alabama at 26. Kwity Paye, the edge rusher from Michigan at 25. Landon Dickerson, the interior offensive lineman from Alabama. Elijah Moore, the receiver from Ole Miss at 23. Christian Darrisaw, the offensive tackle from Virginia Tech at 22. And then at 21, Trey Lance, the quarterback from North Dakota State.
Steven, why do you like being wrong? Patrick Surtain at 28. Unbelievable. But in general, I do like Javonte Williams' placement here. Trey Smith being there is nice too. Landon Dickerson, I think I actually have him almost exactly the same spot. I think you have him 3 spots higher, but overall, good list. I'm a little higher on Christian Darrisaw as we'll see as we go forward.
Yeah.
But I do think this is a pretty good list. Trey Lance being at 21. I think I have Trey Lance a little bit higher. I also didn't really evaluate Chargers fit too much, so I just kind of had him as an overall big board. So that's why Trey Lance is kind of higher.
Sure.
But Patrick Surtain at 28. Explain yourself, or 26. Sorry.
To be fair, Tyler was just saying, he has a 6.8 grade for me. 6.9 was our cutoff for first round grades. For me, just the cornerback position in general. I just think that Patrick Surtain makes a little too many business decisions, in my opinion, when it comes to tackling. And the other thing I will say is that, when it comes to ball production, which is something that I do value quite a bit, we didn't see a whole lot of quarterbacks go his way this year. And so I think that kind of, throws his grade down a little bit. But I still think he's a fantastic player. I just think that, I like the cornerbacks ahead of him a little bit more, obviously. But I do think if the Chargers took him at 13, I would be pretty happy with that pick.
They didn't go his way because he's the best corner in the country.
Well,
Alex, I will say you've made a very good case for Patrick Surtain for me. And when I checked the Pro Football Focus grades, and not the grades, but the stats and his work in the run game, statistically, he turned out better than I thought he did. So you made a really good pitch for him. You were backing him that whole time. I tried to fact check myself. And obviously now he's if you look at my list, we'll get into it, but I think you're happy about where he is relative to my another corner, if you will, that we talked about before. So the other one I want to talk about with Steven, I can't believe Christian Darrisaw is ahead of Elijah Moore and Landon Dickerson, because those are like your guys. Like you have like half an hour of breakdown on YouTube for Elijah Moore and Landon Dickerson, and then Darrisaw ended up ahead of them. So first of all, the grade is lower, but you have him higher. Is there a reason? Like what happened here?
The reason is that I updated his grade and then on the offensive tackle page, and then forgot to update it on the big board. So he does have the exact same grade as Elijah Moore and Landon Dickerson. They're both at 6.85. And then the positional value of the offensive tackle obviously outweighs the positional value of wide receiver and interior offensive line. This is kind of where, I stuck to my grades. And so, I did, when I'm looking at players, I do take notes on how they would fit with the Chargers, but, I'm not taking into consideration medicals like Tyler is. Otherwise, Landon Dickerson, there's no way that he should be that high. But I do love him as a player for sure. The other thing with Christian Darrisaw here, I think a lot of people have really kind of soured on him recently. And, I tweeted this out, but I did want to address this here because I think the narratives about him being lazy just are not fair. They're not accurate. And really, it just doesn't make any sense to me how anyone can watch Christian Darrisaw go downfield, run stride for stride with Khalil Herbert or a receiver and be like, nah, man, that guy's lazy. Like, I'm not about it. So what I'll say about Christian Darrisaw and his effort issues, if you want to call them, I think there's a big difference, a huge difference between not looking for work after you take care of your business and being lazy. And so I think that is the case with Christian Darrisaw because sure, I would love to see him, take care of his own assignment and then go look for work, but at least he's taking care of his assignment, right? He'll throw someone down to the ground and that's good. That's all he does. And that's totally fine. But he's also a tackle. Looking for work is much more of a guard attribute than it is a tackle attribute. So I just think the concerns for Darrisaw have gotten really out of hand. And I know that I have him at 22, but I would be very happy with the Chargers taking him at 13. And if he's their guy, he certainly fits the profile of what Brandon Staley was talking about. So Christian Darrisaw, I think, don't overthink it when it comes to watching Christian Darrisaw on YouTube is pretty much what I'm saying.
Yeah, I totally disagree with the narrative that he's lazy too. He'll be on my list at some point in the future. But I just think, even though he's not a finisher type, or maybe he's not the finisher that Sewell or Slater are, I just can't discount his work in the run game and, just his overall not allowing pressures as a dominant offensive tackle. He's just insane.
Yeah, I do want to see like a little more urgency out of him. And really what I mean by that is him getting to his spot quicker. I think sometimes he really lets the defensive end come to him. And I just want to see him be a little more aggressive out of his stance. And that's really like my personal biggest concern with him. But to say like he's lazy or he doesn't play hard, like to me, that's just not accurate. So I just wanted to talk about that. Alex, let's get to your list here, 30 to 21.
At 30, interior offensive lineman Wyatt Davis, wide receiver Elijah Moore at 29, Landon Dickerson at 28, Greg Newsome at 27, Trevon Morig at 26, Jalen Phillips at 25, Javonte Williams 24, Gregory Rousseau edge, the last of my first round grades at 23, Zach Wilson at 22, quarterback, and cornerback Caleb Farley at 21.
I'm just sitting here looking at, so we are going to share these grades with everybody on Patreon. And Alex, instead of like grades or whatever, has written like these descriptions. And a little bit above where we were just talking about, he has hashtag extend Harbaugh, which is just like hilarious. But Alex, what's the difference for you between Gregory Rousseau and Jalen Phillips?
I don't think it's a big difference. I mean, I think that's why one's at 25 and one's at 23. What I did take into consideration in evaluating Gregory Rousseau and why I have him a little bit higher than some people will is I did put the Jason Tatum. He's only 19. I mean, he did just turn 21 2 weeks ago. And the last season of college football he played, where he had 15 sacks and 19 and a half tackles for loss, 19 and a half tackles for loss was when he was 19. Like, that is kind of a crazy thing to consider. And it makes it really hard because of COVID this year and because he opted out to really evaluate what would his second, year of tape have been. Right. But for me, I just can't shake the feeling that like some team like the Chiefs or the Ravens is going to get him and they're going to fix his hand placement. And then, he's a Pro Bowl tackle or he's a Pro Bowl edge now, So, and I totally get the argument that, his athleticism is a little average and, Miami had the zero technique. But for me, I just think Gregory Rousseau has a lot of potential that at the end of the first round, I'm willing to bet on. And Jalen Phillips does have some of those health concerns, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Go ahead, Tyler.
No, that was it. I was just doing,
Okay. Well, I think if we're kind of looking at this as like a player that, we're going to get drafted in the 20s and be like, man, how did he fall so far? I think Gregory Rousseau is going to be that player.
Yeah.
Especially if he goes to the Ravens, man. Like that just is like the perfect fit. It's the perfect everything for him and for the Ravens. And, they have such a good tradition of, taking these players and developing them. And so I think that would be a crazy situation. All right, Tyler, let's get to your list, 30 to 21.
Alrighty, at 30, I have Javonte Williams. And then, look, honestly, when I was trying to figure out where the hell to put these quarterbacks, I don't even like him as much as where I place them, but I do put some position value into consideration. Yeah. I don't even want them here, but they are here because they're quarterbacks, and it'll save my ass later on when they turn out really good, and then whatever. So I have Trey Lance at 29, Zach Wilson at 28, then Rashad Bateman, then Creed Humphrey, Kwity Paye, Tevin Jenkins, Richie Grant, Caleb Farley, and Landon Dickerson at 21.
What was the difference, I guess, for you putting Zach Wilson over Trey Lance?
I think Lance has when you say someone has the higher ceiling potentially, I feel like that's also like, well, that means he was kind of inconsistent, and potentially if you just fix those things, he'll be better. To me, I think Trey Lance was just a little too inconsistent for my taste. I really don't like either of these guys, honestly. So just having them over the other, I think Wilson, I have to give Wilson credit for what he did this past season. I've really tried hard. I don't like
to not give him credit
this year. Listen, what he did this year against who he faced, I think was pretty good, and I think that he deserves to and we did see him more recently, so I'm going to put him over it. Like, the difference in grades isn't really all that significant, honestly. I just think Trey Lance is a little more sometimes he'll throw the most beautiful ball in the world, and then he'll just kind of miss, and then there's a miss, and it's like, what happened there? Where I think Zach Wilson is slightly more consistent, and therefore that's why I think at least a couple of the reasons that he takes the lead there.
Yeah, Jordan Reed from the Draft Network really did this great breakdown of like the difference between ball placement and accuracy. And I think that's the kind of thing that you talk about with Trey Lance is that, he shows really good flashes of being a very accurate quarterback, but his ball placement is not always there. And so, you watch him just, throw a Russell Wilson moon ball and you're just like, damn, this guy's arm talent is awesome. And then you see him throw, a 10-yard out route and it's, 5 yards out of bounds. So I think Trey Lance definitely has some accuracy issues. I think his running profile definitely will help him. It's going to be so interesting to see where he falls because, Albert Breer has kind of talked about a lot of teams are not touching anybody who opted out. Like they're kind of worried about that year off. And so I'm wondering if that's kind of going to apply to the quarterbacks and how far Trey Lance will fall.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. I personally don't think he's going to fall very far. Just because he's a quarterback also, and if you're in that top 4, top 5 range discussion, your need that teams will have for you will just be automatically boosted because of the value of the position. So I do think some team is going to take him probably in the top 10, whether that's maybe top 5, depending on what the Falcons do. I think we have a pretty good idea of who the first 3 picks are going to be, obviously based on my reporting with Sex Eyes. I think Trey Lance and Mac Jones are going to go probably still in the top 10, or maybe Mac Jones slips out a little bit in that top 15, but just because they're quarterbacks, they're going to get taken where they are.
Yeah, I don't know if you saw the comments, Alex, but I think we've got some T-shirt requests for the Sex Eyes.
Yeah, I mean, when we get a slightly bigger budget, maybe we'll give away, or we could sell T-shirts, or maybe we'll make one and give it away. That'd be fun.
There we go. All right, let's get to 20 through 11. At 20, I have Trayvon Merrick, the safety from TCU. I have learned that it's pronounced Merrick, not Morig, so apologies. At 19, I have Creed Humphrey, the interior offensive lineman from Oklahoma. At 18, I have Jalen Waddle, the receiver from Alabama. That experience has been crazy for me. Richie Grant, the safety from UCF. Azeez Ojulari, the edge rusher from Georgia at 15. Samuel Cosmi at 14, the offensive tackle from Texas. Devontae Smith, the receiver from Alabama. Caleb Farley, even with the medical concerns, I have to stick to my grade, so I do have him here at number 12. And then Najee Harris, my highest graded running back from the last 2 years. Just so good. That is number 11, Najee Harris.
So what changed your mind on Jalen Waddle? What was that for you?
So I think really when you talk about this past season, like obviously Devontae Smith had such a good season, but if you watch the first couple games, Jalen Waddle was the number 1 receiver. Like he was doing a lot more intermediate stuff than I had previously realized. And he had a couple catches against Missouri that really raised his ball skills grade for me, which really bumped him up quite a bit. Obviously, I think, in terms of a route runner specialist, I do think that Devontae Smith is a far superior route runner, but Waddle's speed, his ball skills, and his ability after the catch or, after contact, I think really kind of bumped him up. And, I don't know what it was like at the start of the season, but I was like, man, I just really don't want to like Jalen Waddle because I think, the Tyreek Hill comparison really was so annoying. But once I was able to kind of really focus in on him, I bumped him up from like wide receiver 6, I think initially, to wide receiver 3. And I think he was like in the 40s, and now he's all the way up at 18. So definitely been a wild experience watching Jalen Waddle for me.
Yeah, I mean, I just think, I know Tyler probably won't like him as much, but I do think just his raw athleticism and all that, like the fact he was wide receiver 1 this year at Alabama, like the matchups he can create are just, while I understand why some people have him lower, it's just hard for me to like really put him below wide receiver 3.
Yeah, and then you watch that national championship game, and like I don't know if he's healthy yet, but like the dude was limping and still just running past the Ohio State defense. So like the guy's just insanely fast, and I think it's a little unfair to put him any lower than the top 20.
All right, so
I do like Waddle.
Yeah,
you have Waddle in your top 15 too, don't you?
Yep, he is. Top. He's well, 13th. We'll get to it, but yes, 13th.
So we both come around.
Which is
definitely been
a bad number.
Yeah. All right. So, Alex, let's get to your list 20 through 11.
Number 20, I have Edge Quiddy Pay from Michigan. Number 19, I have Elijah Vera Tucker out of USC. 18, I have Rashad Bateman, wide receiver from Minnesota. J.C. Horn at 17, cornerback out of South Carolina. Jalen Waddle, wide receiver. Azeez Ojulari, edge at 15. Samuel Cosme at 14. Najee Harris at 13. Christian Darrisaw at 12. And Micah Parsons, 11, out of the worst school in the country.
So we both have Samuel Cosme at 14, man.
Yeah, I was a little bit surprised by that, just in terms of evaluating him, because I guess my initial thing was like, all right, I'm going to have him somewhere between 20 and 30, but he did burst for me on tape, and, you watch some of the games there at Texas, and I just thought he was really impressive. Not going to be, I mentioned Darrisaw, who's obviously my OT3, based on, the two guys that are left at offensive tackle for me, but, he's really impressive, and I just think you look at his physical skill set and his tools, and if a team gets their hands on that, it could be, a real nightmare for the league.
Top 15, y'all. I don't know. I don't know. I mean, I know Alex's whole ranking is just based on whatever he felt like that day. So I guess I don't know if Cosme was actually grade. I don't know if the grades are similar to where he'd actually be ranked or what. But all right. I mean, you know, you guys have done a wonderful job evaluating these guys, and I respect your opinions.
Oh man! All right, Tyler, let's get to your 20 through 11 here.
All right, my top 20. Greg Newsome, he was my CB2, but I have to be realistic with the injuries and the fact, Alex told me a little bit more on Patrick Surtain, so he's my CB3 now. I have Najee Harris, then Trayvon Merrick, then Elijah Moore. I will stomp and shout until he gets picked.
Oh yeah.
And then Jalen Phillips, and then Christian Darrisaw, Micah Parsons, Jalen Waddle, who everyone was like, "Oh, is this your new Gabe Neighbors?" Because it's not that I didn't like Waddle. I didn't like him. I didn't like him to the Chargers at 13. That's it. Yeah. It's not that I don't like Waddle. I just don't want him there at 13. I really don't care what receivers there at 13. Don't do it. I don't care what Matt $ Smith says. Let's not do it. But Waddle for me, he went like with Steven, he went up my board because I just think that talent is undeniable. Well, do I think he's the most complete receiver? Not really, and that's why I have two receivers ahead of him. But the talent is so undeniable that it was hard to not put him in my top 20, and so he is. And then Patrick Surtain as my CB2 now, Alex, at 12. Then Azeez Ojulari at 11.
So, I mean, obviously, I did not grade Micah Parsons. I have a very unfortunate personal connection to his legal issues, so I am not doing that. So I'll let you guys, both of you graded him as a top 15 player. So Tyler and Alex, what do you guys think of Micah Parsons? I know a lot of people have talked about him as potentially converting to edge rusher, or maybe the Chargers taking him at 13. So what do you guys see in Micah Parsons?
Yeah, I thought I was going to like him a lot more than I did. Not that I hate him. He's at 14 for me, and everyone's talking about this incredible generational kind of guy. Okay, I'm not going to say he's like Kenneth Murray because I didn't grade or watch a lot of Kenneth Murray, and I really didn't grade him. But, Parsons, athletic, and he's great at blitzing, and that just kind of reminds me of Kenneth Murray because they also both don't really diagnose as well as I would have liked, and maybe that's why Micah Parsons is more considered an edge potentially. So because, and Kenneth Murray kind of does misfires as well. So, Kenneth Murray went 23rd or whatever. Not that I like Micah Parsons more, I think. But again, I didn't watch Kenneth Murray. But I just think there's a couple of issues there. But again, sort of like Waddle, the talent is undeniable. The guy's a freak. He's huge. The physical gifts are out of this world. So I think he's worthy of a top 15 selection. But I don't like him in that top 10 like some people are considering him.
Yeah, so I did watch Micah Parsons. I watched him, very early on in the process because he opted out, and so I was kind of going through all the opt-outs, and I did watch him. I think from a linebacker standpoint, that's where I am playing him. I think the athleticism, the speed. Yeah. I mean, he ran a 4.36, so even with the pro day inflation, he ran a 4.4. If you just round it off there, that's just absurd speed. He does.
Mhm.
I mean, he's 246. He's 6'3", so I'm not really playing him at edge. I think his kind of athleticism is going to be better used as a linebacker. I think you can kind of look at what Devin White has done for the Buccaneers and kind of look at that as the profile. And hopefully the Chargers are using Devin White as a profile for Kenneth Murray as well. But I'm not playing him at edge. I think he's an off-the-ball linebacker. But again, I'm not grading him. So, all right, let's get to our top 10s. This is going to be an exciting conversation for sure. At number 10 for me personally, I have Elijah Vera Tucker, someone that I have pounded the table for throughout this entire process. I very begrudgingly moved him to interior offensive line just because, I do think the length concerns will have most teams pegging him as an interior offensive lineman. But I do think that he could play tackle in a pinch. I just think, great athlete, very aware player of his surroundings. I think he's incredibly smart, takes great angles, and I'm just a big fan of his as well. Jamar Chase, the wide receiver from LSU, is my number 9 player. There have been some talk from a certain network as he's the best receiver since Calvin Johnson. Hard to disagree there. I do think CeeDee Lamb would be ahead of him if they were in the same class, in my opinion. But I do like Jamar Chase. Great ball skills, great physicality. He's only 6 feet tall, but I think the kind of way, like the physical and aggressive nature in which he runs routes, I just love it. He's got a lot of A.J. Brown in him in that regard, although A.J. Brown is a little more jacked up. Tevin Jenkins, the offensive tackle from Oklahoma State, at number 8. Love him. Someone that has skyrocketed up my personal board just because of the way that he plays. I know certain people have kind of pegged him as someone that the Chargers would not take because he plays right tackle. But I do believe that he could play left tackle for any team, and specifically the Chargers. I think the tenacity that he plays with, the way that he fires off the ball, is going to translate to either side. And then J.C. Horn, the cornerback from South Carolina. My cornerback 1 is at number 7. I've talked about him quite a bit, so I'm not going to highlight him too much here. And then Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, the safety from Notre Dame. And if you have listened to our conversation or my conversation with Ben Fennell, that's kind of a thing. A lot of people in the league do view him as a safety. And I just think the kind of speed, size, athleticism that he brings to the table, one of the best cover players, regardless of position, in this class. I think someone's going to take Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, move him around all over the field, and get a great player. At number 5, Rashawn Slater, the offensive tackle / interior offensive lineman for Northwestern. I'm not too confident that the Chargers would actually take him if he were there, just because I do think that their physical profile that they're looking for might not fit what Rashawn Slater is at 6'4" with 33-inch arms. But incredibly technically sound player, brings the most diverse package as a pass blocker, can win in all of the different techniques. I think there is a very interesting conversation that he could play interior offensive line, maybe for the Giants. I think that is kind of where he starts to potentially fall off the board. Maybe Carolina if Penei Sewell goes sooner. But I think Rashawn Slater is going to be a fantastic player. And then I have the 2 quarterbacks, Justin Fields out of Ohio State at number 4, Trevor Lawrence at number 3. I think that's a very interesting conversation. I know people, including myself, have kind of pegged Trevor Lawrence as far and away the better quarterback, but I do think that Justin Fields is very close to that. And then Kyle Pitts, the offensive weapon / tight end from Florida, at number 2, and Penei Sewell, the offensive tackle out of Oregon, who to me is the best offensive tackle class that we've seen in the last 10-15 years, is my number 1 player.
As Alex would say, that's very on brand for you.
It is very on brand for you.
Number 1.
So let me see. That's 1, 2, 3, 4 offensive linemen in the top 10.
That's right. Better believe it. Well, at positional value, obviously, influences things there because, Najee Harris and Elijah Vera Tucker had the same grade, but Najee Harris is a running back, so he's the least valuable position. Yeah. He's at the least valuable position, so he's lower. But yeah, 4 offensive linemen in my top 10.
I love it. I love Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah. I mean, we all have him in the top somewhere, or in the top 10. We haven't said it yet. And of course, that's the only thing left. So of course we have him in the top 10. But there are just few guys in this draft who are actual thumpers in the run game, who bring the heat, who just have that extra something. And he's like one of the only guys who has it in this draft. So yeah, I love him here as your best defender. as, let's see, my highest graded defender as well. What he does at his job, he's fantastic. So whoever gets him, it's going to be a ball, unless he goes to the Raiders, and then it's going to be terrible.
Yeah, that's not going to be fun.
What I know you've been on the Tevin Jenkins train for like the last month or so. What boosted Tevin Jenkins stock for you?
Well, I think, the way that he dominates in the run game is like the first thing that everybody watches, but he's an incredibly physical blocker as a pass blocker as well. You watch his understanding of leverage and the way that he is, on balance and under control at all times, I think is what kind of has separated him for me. I look at the way that he finishes blocks, and again, finishing blocks, if you've read kind of my profiles on all these guys, finishing blocks can mean a number of different things. Obviously, it means getting players to the ground, but it also means keeping your feet pumping and pushing people down the field. And I think you watch the most impressive block that I have seen on film this year is watching Tevin Jenkins block Joseph Osai 15 yards out of bounds. Like the way that Tevin Jenkins mauls people in the run game, I think really is going to translate well, which is, Chris Sims talking about Tevin Jenkins need work as a run blocker is just the worst assessment out of any. It's so bad. But yeah, Tevin Jenkins, I'm a big fan of his. And then he tested a lot better than I thought he would. And that's kind of what boosted him up, because up until his pro day, he was at like 15, 16. And then that kind of athletic profile just kind of boosted him up.
Yeah, I mean, he's kind of insane. Going into my top 10, I have Trey Lance, quarterback from North Dakota State, at number 10. Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah at linebacker at number 9. 8, Devonta Smith, wide receiver from Alabama. I mean, pretty self-explanatory. I think he's the second best wide receiver in this class. We'll get to my first later. Patrick Surtain, CB1, number 7. Not number 27, Steven. But he is number 7. Here, I just think he has the least question marks at the cornerback position, and I think he's day one, plug-and-play guy. And I think, obviously he hasn't shown a lack of athleticism either, which has been my biggest problems when people criticize him. Justin Fields at number 6, obviously very high. He's the clear QB2 in my opinion. I know the Jets are going to take Zach Wilson, but to me, they should seriously reconsider that and take Justin Fields. I think a lot of people are sleeping on him. He does have some interesting, tendencies when pressure comes and sort of can overreact sometimes. But to me, the skills that he has and the ability to coach that out of him to some degree, I think that, is why he's at number 6. I think his flaws that he has are fixable. And then obviously his natural skill is insane too. Rashawn Slater, offensive tackle at number 5. Penei Sewell, offensive tackle at number 4. They weren't separated by a lot for me, kind of when it came down to it, but I still do have Penei Sewell ahead of Rashawn Slater. I have Kyle Pitts, the offensive weapon, tight end, wide receiver, fullback, whatever you want to call him, at number 3. I think he's just kind of an insane physical player, and he's a great route runner too. And whatever team takes him in that top 10, please don't be Dallas. Is going to have a guy that for the next 10 to 15 years is going to be dominant. I have Jamar Chase at number 2, probably the biggest difference in this top 10 when it looks at looking at me and Steven and Tyler's. And of course, I do have Wonder Boy, Trevor Lawrence, quarterback at number 1. I'm going to get a lot of shit in the comments because of my Lawrence Herbert take video when we evaluated the quarterbacks, but I do think he's the clear above all quarterback in this class. Very few flaws to really point out in his game. And I think he's just going to be a great pick for Jacksonville. And I hate that because I hate Urban Meyer. But that's my top 10.
I love your description right here of LSU. Odell handing out Bams University.
Yeah, that national championship game. First of all, fuck the NCAA. Odell should be allowed to hand out whatever he wants to Jamar Chase or any of the 2019 national champions. But no. And I also Urban Meyer swamp for Florida. But It's yeah, no. I had a little fun with those, and for our patrons, if you want to access the Google sheet of our top 50, you can have fun with all the names I chose.
Absolutely. Tyler, any thoughts on Alex's top 10 here?
I love Chase over. I mean, I disagree, but I love Chase over Pitts. Like, I don't think I've seen a whole lot of that, but I like it. Jamar Chase is a fantastic wide receiver. I just think Pitts is kind of. You can probably get Chase maybe a guy like Chase every few years. I don't think you can get a guy like Pitts every few years. But no, I still like it. I mean, he's a great player. I only have him
I can totally
two below.
Yeah, I could totally see that. For me, the whole some Ian Rappaport posted some tweet that was like, some agent told me that he was actually the best wide receiver since Julio in the draft, and I was like, okay. But I was actually curious, and I went through like the last 8-9 years of wide receivers, and I was trying to find like who's the last guy that came out that was like Jamar Chase. And the guy I landed on was in 2015, Amari Cooper. He came out to the Raiders. And to me, Jamar Chase, is kind of Amari Cooper 2.0 with how he physically runs routes, the speed that he has being somewhat comparable to Amari Cooper. That's why I have him at 2. And, while I am happy that the Eagles traded out to 12, because I think it was the right thing to do, potentially missing out on Jamar Chase will keep me up every night, probably for the next 15 years. But yeah, I just think for me, it's just such a slight difference with him and Pitts on my board. I know most people would put Pitts there, but to me, to have like a true dominator type wide receiver 1, I just value that a little bit more over a total offensive weapon. But that's just my opinion on Jamar Chase. I know some people have him higher, some people have him lower, but that's and to me, as like I said with Amari Cooper, I wouldn't go as far back as Julio, but I do think out of the last decade, he grades for me as, one of the top 3 guys to come out.
Wow.
That's an interesting conversation for sure. I would love to go back and kind of compare, because I loved CeeDee Lamb last year. I thought CeeDee Lamb, I think he's going to be such an awesome player in the NFL. He landed in such a great situation in Dallas. So that's going to be an interesting conversation to look back on. All right, Tyler, let's get to your top 10 here. Go for it.
Alrighty, at number 10, I have JC Horn. I just think the mentality that he brings, like not just what he does on the field, but everything I've heard about him, wanting that alpha cornerback mentality and the way he plays, I just have to put him ahead. Even though I think maybe sort of like if you had 100 reps against a receiver, Surtain might be better year 1. Like I think over time you want a guy like Horn. Next, I have Devonta Smith, then Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, then Elijah Vera Tucker, a guy that I was lower on when I watched him on YouTube. Then I switched over to All 22, and then Steven did a great breakdown. And it's like, oh, okay, I get it now. I'm really happy to have him here, not because I'm a USC fan, but because I think he's really good. Although I do have him at interior offensive line, just because I think that is where he is, and he's going to end up being the best as a guard, which is not a slight to him. I just think he's so good as a guard that he's a guy to pound the table for. Next is Rashawn Slater. I have him as a tackle. Whatever you want to do with him, fine. But I think as a tackle, he showed that he could handle the best. And so he is my offensive tackle 2. Then Jamar Chase, the difference between Chase and Smith for me, I just like the way Jamar Chase, I mean, look, both of them are fantastic players, but Jamar Chase, I just like the physicality of how he plays, the mentality of how he plays. Maybe that's why I like, Horn as well over Surtain. There's something about that edge, mentally that he has. The next is Justin Fields. He's number 4. Then Kyle Pitts at 3, Penei Sewell at 2, and then Trevor Lawrence at 1. Lawrence at the end of the day gets the position value boost, and so he's my number 1 player.
Yeah, I think he's the number 1 player. I think he's going to be the first player taken. Did you see what happened at his wedding recently?
No, I didn't see that.
He had Jacksonville Jaguars fans pay for things on his wedding registry.
Oh my God.
So apparently he's also got the playbook already from Urban Meyer and company. So this is one of the rare years where there's not going to be any debate. It's been Trevor Lawrence from day one. I love Penei Sewell and Kyle Pitts, man. And I think, those two are far and away the better players in my opinion in the class. But that's just me. Trevor Lawrence though, at number 3, like you can't go wrong there. And if he was a little higher graded, the thing with the quarterbacks is that they have 6 categories and everybody else has 5 for us. So that I guess maybe could hurt them a little bit more. But Trevor Lawrence, I don't think you can go wrong with him at number 1 overall.
Honestly, though, like I was thinking about what you just said with like, it's one of the few years we don't have a conversation at number 1, but I was just thinking about it. It's like, okay, we had Joe Burrow last year. Everybody knew that was happening. Then we had Kyler Murray, which everybody knew was happening. And then, you can kind of go back and it feels like every year it's a quarterback at number 1 now. So, what's the point of talking about it? The suspense at number 1, because usually there's kind of not anymore.
That's true. And I think Houston probably taking number 1 overall next year probably is taking a quarterback. Wait. Do they owe Miami their next year's first round pick too?
Probably.
I don't.
I haven't.
It'd be hilarious, but I don't think so.
I'll Google this.
Okay, because I can't imagine Houston wins many games at all. So, lots of overlap. Obviously, I think most of us, all 3 of us have Slater, Sewell, Pitts, Lawrence in our top 10, Fields as well. I think Alex is you're the only one that has Patrick Surtain in the top 10, obviously, but that's kind of your guy. So. That really is like the only difference, I think. And then obviously Elijah Vera Tucker for me and Tyler. I'm just now seeing that Tyler has written wrong next to Alex's players. I love that. All right, guys. Any other thoughts on our top 50 before we wrap up today's show?
I'm still trying to look to see. No, okay. So I think the Texans do have their first round pick next year. Luckily for them.
That's good because they'll need it.
Yeah, they're going to need a lot of picks. And we'll see if they get any for Deshaun Watson at some point. But no, I thought this was a really fun experiment to do and ranking all of them. I'd never done it before. Obviously, I've had guys that I liked in the draft before and guys that I wanted my teams to take. But, I think this is the first year where I really broke it down personally. I didn't do any grades last year. Maybe I'll be so wrong this year that next year I'll actually use the numbers and break down, which digit is in the thousandth place. But that may be a correction to my process at some point in the future. But it was really fun to do this. And I'm excited. Next year's draft, thankfully, in 11 days, we get a reprieve from all the pre-draft bullshit. But eventually, I'll be ready to start it again, and it'll be fun.
Yeah, and I'm going to love this process. Since we do our draft next week, just have this out, crossing the names off like I did last year, except it was Steven and Jason's lists. Now it's partially my list as well. So it's going to be cool to be excited through at least the first 3 rounds, knowing pretty much who everybody is. I am impressed that we all have an Alabama player, a different Alabama player at 13. Steven has Smith, I have Waddle, and Alex has Harris. Which means that I guess the Chargers should take one of them at 13 because they're the best player available.
Lucky
because
number
that
13.
Makes sense. You should always be best player available. I hate that whole best player available talk. Like
best player available and from Alabama.
Alabama. Apparently that's where we're going.
Little YouTube blog. I did a video today about my feud with Matt Money Smith and and best player available versus position of need. So go check that out.
Yes, obviously go check that out. That's going to be a lot of great work. And then, I would be remiss to not mention the great content that we are going to be having to be able to put out to you guys with Brad Kelly, Scott Simpson, and Arjun Minaj, and as well as the people over at Die Hard Bolt Club. None of that would be possible without all of your support, and we're so excited to see what all of them can bring to the table. I think it's going to be a great time for all of us to be able to have, a great Chargers fantasy plug and another film breakdown guy. And I think analytics are they're becoming such a huge part in football. And I think having someone that we can rely upon to put out weekly analytical videos is going to be so huge. So can't wait to work with all of them. And we're super excited for what they're going to bring to the table. And again, thank you guys so much for tuning in. Like I did say, we are going to publish these later on our Patreon page. So go check that out. We've updated all of our tiers. So if you are a patron, please go check and make sure if you want to update. We do really appreciate all of that support. Thank you guys for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.
Patron is alcohol.
Patron, sorry.